It wasn't the first time I'd stayed over at Mason's house, but it was the first time his older brother asked me to stay in his room. It was late, one of those sticky summer nights when sleep never really comes easy. Mason had passed out hours ago in a tangle of limbs and blankets, his fan whirring too loud, his room too warm, too close. I couldn't sleep. Not with my thoughts tangled and heart stubbornly wide awake. I was about to go downstairs for water when Eli appeared in the hallway, backlit by the soft glow from the bathroom light. His hair was messy, like he'd just woken up, and he rubbed the back of his neck like he was trying to stretch out a question. "It's too hot in there, right?" he asked. "You can crash in my room if you want." He didn't wait for an answer, just turned and left the door open behind him. I stood there for a second, caught in something I couldn't name. I wasn't sure if he was just being polite. I wasn't sure if it meant anything. But I followed him anyway. And now I'm lying on the floor beside his bed, staring at the ceiling while the night presses in quiet and close. He hasn't said a word in over an hour. But I can feel him watching me. And I can't stop wondering. Is this nothing? Or the beginning of everything? When I first met Mason in sophomore year, I didn't think we'd be friends. He was loud in the way that fills up a room, confident without ever having to try. The kind of person who could fall into a conversation with anyone, who made eye contact easily and never seemed to flinch when people looked at him too long. I admired that about him, envied it, really. We got paired together for a history project and ended up spending most afternoons that month in his kitchen, surrounded by textbooks and junk food. His house was the kind of place where people didn't whisper, where the floors creaked under footsteps and laughter was never too far off. His mom baked cookies in the middle of the day for no reason. His dad came home from work and kissed her like it wasn't a habit. I think I started coming over long after the project was done because being there made me feel like I could breathe. And then there was Eli. He was never around exactly. I'd catch glimpses of him, heading out the door with headphones in, coming home with his backpack slung over one shoulder, sometimes still in his college hoodie, sometimes shirtless and sweaty from a run. The kind of person who made silence look intentional. The kind of person who didn't need to speak to be noticed. The first time we really talked, it was late, Mason had gone to bed, and I was scrolling on my phone at the kitchen table, eating cereal. Eli walked in and poured himself a glass of water. I nodded at him, unsure if I should say anything. He just leaned on the counter and said, "You're the quiet friend." "Guess I am," I said, unsure if that was a good thing or not. He nodded. "Quiet's not bad. Sometimes people say more when they don't say anything at all." After that, he disappeared back upstairs. But the next time I was over, he asked how my classes were going. Then a few weeks later, he offered me a slice of leftover pizza and asked if I liked music. "Sometimes," I said, which made him laugh. "What does that even mean?" "I mean, yeah, I like music. But mostly the sad stuff." He smiled at that. "That checks out." It was always small things. A passing comment. A too long look. The way he held the door for me but didn't wait for a thank you. The way he seemed to notice when I hadn't said much and didn't try to fill the silence. I started paying attention to him more than I meant to. Noticing how he sat with one leg tucked under the other when he read on the couch. How he hummed, almost absent-mindedly, when he cooked. How he only ever used one specific mug, grey and chipped at the rim, and got weirdly quiet if someone else grabbed it. He wasn't loud like Mason. He didn't fill a room. He slipped into it. But when he did, the room felt different. And I was starting to realize I liked that feeling too much. At home, things were quieter, but not the good kind. My parents were the sort of people who used silence like a shield. They were civil to each other, polite to me, but nothing ever felt warm star. I spent most of my time in my room, noise-cancelling headphones on, pretending I was somewhere else. Maybe that's why I clung to Mason's world the way I did. His family felt like sunlight in winter. A kind of noise that didn't hurt. Eli felt like something else. Something slower. Something I hadn't had before. I never told Mason. What would I even say? Hey, I think I'm developing feelings for your older brother who barely talks and sometimes looks at me like I'm something he's trying to figure out. Yeah, no. Besides, it wasn't anything, right? Just a look. A touch of quiet understanding. The way my name sounded a little different when he said it. We weren't close Eli and I. But we noticed each other. That much I knew. It was enough to make me stay a little longer every time. Enough to make me sit in the living room and pretend to do homework if I knew he'd be home soon. Enough to make my stomach tighten when he asked how my week was going and listened, really listened, to the answer. He had this way of asking questions that didn't feel like small talk. Like, what do you think people mean when they say they're fine? Or, have you ever wanted to be someone else just for a day? Questions that left me unraveling hours later. Sometimes I'd hear him playing piano late at night, soft and slow, like the music wasn't meant for anyone but still had to come out. It was never full songs, just pieces. Fragments. Like he only ever wanted to say half of something. I knew what that felt like. So when the storm came, and Mason knocked out early, and Eli opened his bedroom door and offered me space in the quiet, I didn't hesitate. Not because I thought anything would happen, but because I wanted to be where he was. Even if we didn't speak. Even if he never said why he offered. Even if all we ever did was almost star. Because sometimes, the almost is enough to break your heart. And sometimes, it's the only thing keeping it beating. After that night in Eli's room, things didn't go back to normal, but they didn't exactly change either. He didn't bring it up. I didn't ask. We went back to pretending, which, somehow, hurt more than I thought it would. The way silence stretched between us now wasn't peaceful. It was tight, breathless. Like something was always waiting in the space between us, and neither of us was brave enough to let it speak. I saw him the next morning in the kitchen. He was making coffee, standing barefoot in grey sweats and a faded college t-shirt, and my body went still the second I walked in. He looked up when he heard me. His eyes met mine for maybe half a second too long before he turned away and reached for a second mug. "You want some?" he asked, casual, too casual. I nodded, swallowing whatever it was clawing its way up my throat. He slid the mug across the counter. Our fingers didn't touch. "Sleep okay?" he asked. I wanted to say not really or not without you looking at me like that again but I just nodded. "Yeah. Thanks." He nodded back. And that was it. Nothing more. Later that day, I walked past his room and saw him inside, door cracked open just slightly, a book open in his lap and his expression unreadable. I thought about knocking. Thought about asking what happened or what it meant or if he was going to pretend forever star. But I didn't. Instead, I kept walking. That summer unfolded in strange rhythms. I spent more time at Mason's, not because I had to, but because I couldn't stay away. I told myself it was for the friendship, the comfort of the house, the familiarity. But really, it was Eli. Even in the days when we barely spoke, I kept showing up. Sitting through dinners where he'd pass me the salt without looking. Movie nights where he sat across the room, but I could feel his gaze on the side of my face like heat. Once, we were alone in the backyard. Mason had gone to pick up burgers, and his parents were out for the evening. Eli was tending the little herb garden in the corner of the yard, his hands covered in soil, and I just watched him for a while. "You always look like you're thinking too much," he said without turning. "Maybe I am." He smiled faintly, still looking at the basil. "What about?" I hesitated. "Everything. Nothing. Depends on the day." He glanced at me then. "You ever wish your head would just be quiet for once?" I exhaled, shaky. "All the time." He nodded, like that meant something. Maybe to both of us. We didn't say anything else for a while. Just let the sound of rustling leaves and birdsong fill the air. And then, like he couldn't help himself, he said, softly, "I think about that night a lot." I looked at him, startled. He was still focused on the plants, hands trembling slightly as he clipped a sprig of thyme. "I think about how close we were to something," he said. "And how I let it go." I didn't know what to say. So I didn't say anything. And neither did he. The next week, I was in the living room reading when Eli sat beside me, close, not touching, but closer than usual. My skin prickled with the awareness of him. "What are you reading?" he asked. "Something sad," I said. He chuckled. "Of course." "I like when things hurt a little," I admitted. "Why?" "Because it means something mattered." He looked at me like I'd just said something holy. Then he nodded, slow and quiet. "I get that," he said. "More than you know." I wanted to ask him, what hurt you? Who taught you how to hold everything in until it cracks? But I didn't. I just let our elbows rest a little closer, let the silence settle in like something warm. That night, as I left the house, he walked me to the door. "I'll see you tomorrow," he asked, voice soft. "Yeah." He stood there like he wanted to say something more, and I waited, silently hoping. But in the end, he just nodded and shut the door behind me. It was late July when things finally snapped. We were alone in his room. Mason was out with friends, and for some reason, Eli had asked me to help him reorganize some shelves. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe I just wanted a reason to be in his space again. We worked in silence for a while. Passing books. Rearranging boxes. At some point, I pulled down an old photo album from the top shelf and wiped dust from the cover. "That's my mom's," Eli said. "She kept everything. First steps. First haircuts." I flipped it open, and there was a photo of him as a kid, maybe 6 years old, grinning up at the camera with gap teeth and a juice box in hand. "You were cute," I said. He rolled his eyes, but smiled. "Still I looked up at him, and something in me cracked. "You know I wanted to kiss you that night," I said suddenly, before I could stop myself. He froze. The room went very still. His eyes met mine, stunned, unguarded. "I know." "You didn't," I said, voice barely a whisper. He swallowed. "Because I was scared." "Of what?" "Of what it meant. Of what it would do to you. To Mason. To me." "I wasn't scared." "I know," he said again. That scared me even more. We stood there, staring at each other across a foot of space that felt like a mile. Then he stepped forward. 1 step. 2. Until we were standing almost chest to chest. His voice was trembling. "Do you still want to?" I nodded. "Yes." He didn't kiss me. Not yet. He reached out first, fingers brushing my wrist like he was asking for permission one last time. Like he was still afraid I'd pull away. But I didn't. I leaned in. Just a breath between us. And still, he didn't move. "Elijah," I whispered. And that did it. His hand came up to cup the side of my face, and when our lips finally met, it wasn't fireworks or a sudden collapse of years of tension. It was slow. Deep. Careful. Like unwrapping something fragile you'd waited too long to open. He kissed me like he needed to remember how. And I kissed him like I'd never forget. When we pulled apart, neither of us said a word. We just stood there, breathing each other in. And in that silence, something shifted. Not everything was healed. Not everything made sense. But we weren't pretending anymore. And that was enough, for now. It would have been easier if things had gotten simple after that kiss. But they didn't. If anything, they got messier, quietly, painfully, beautifully so. We didn't talk about it the next day. Or the day after that. There were looks. There were almosts. There were moments where we passed in the hallway and his hand brushed mine like a secret, but neither of us stopped. Like if we did, if we named it, it would vanish. And maybe I was just as scared as he had been. Then one night, 2 weeks later, it all broke open. It was raining, hard, the kind of storm that rattles the windows and makes the world feel smaller. I was supposed to be staying in Mason's room, again, but he'd gone out late with friends and hadn't come back. I stayed up reading, the sound of thunder rolling in waves, until I heard it, soft footsteps in the hall. Then a knock on the door. When I opened it, Eli was there, barefoot, hair damp, wearing a t-shirt that clung to his skin. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, like he was trying to find something in my face that would tell him it was okay to fall apart. And I stepped aside. He walked in, stood in the middle of the room like he didn't know where to go, then finally turned to face me. "I keep thinking about that night," he said. "Not the kiss. Before that. I waited. When you were lying on the floor. When I was pretending to sleep but couldn't stop watching you. And I kept wondering if you could feel me looking at you." I nodded, slow. I could. He breathed in, like that admission took the weight off his chest. "I wanted to say something," he went on. "I almost did. But I've always been good at almosts." I stepped closer, heart pounding in my throat. "Then don't almost this." He looked at me like I'd just broken something open in him. "I don't know what I'm doing," he whispered. "I don't know how to be this." I wanted to tell him he didn't have to know. That there was no roadmap for whatever it was we were building. That he didn't need to have the words if he had the truth. So instead, I said, "Start with what's real." and his hands came up slowly, like he was afraid I might vanish. He held my face like it mattered. And then he said it. The thing I didn't know I needed to hear. I see you. Not asterisk I like you dot asterisk. Not asterisk I want you dot asterisk. Asterisk I see you dot asterisk. My throat closed up. I'd spent so much of my life fading into rooms. Being the background. The quiet friend. The one who knew how to disappear without ever leaving. But not here. Not with him. I reached for his hands, holding them against my skin. Then don't look away. And he didn't. He pulled me in, and this time the kiss was different. It wasn't hesitant or careful. It wasn't the slow undoing of nerves. It was need. It was everything we hadn't said. My hand slid under his shirt, feeling the heat of him, the curve of his back, the tremble in his shoulders. He gasped into my mouth like he couldn't believe it was happening. Like the want had been there for so long it hurt to let it out. We sank to the floor, not in desperation, but in something close to surrender. He pressed his forehead to mine, breath shaking. "This scares the hell out of me," he whispered. I nodded. Me too. But I'd rather be scared than pretend I don't feel this. The rain outside softened into something quieter, more rhythmic. As if the storm had finally passed through, leaving only the hum of its aftermath. We stayed like that for what felt like hours. Wrapped in each other. Breathing the same air. Letting the silence hold us. And eventually, his voice, small and steady, "You make me feel like I'm allowed to want more than I've settled for." Tears stung my eyes. Not because it was sad, but because it was true. I pressed my lips to his temple. "So let's want it together." He nodded, and I felt it more than saw it. "I don't know what comes next," he murmured. "With Mason. With any of this." I pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "Then we take it one night at a time." He smiled, tired, raw, real. "I can do that." And maybe that's all it was. One night. One look. One moment of letting go. But in that moment, something in me settled. Like I'd finally found the thing I didn't know I was missing. Not the kiss. Not even the love. But the feeling of being known. And knowing I was brave enough to stay. The morning after, the world didn't shatter or shift. The sun still rose. The coffee still brewed. The house still creaked with its usual lived-in hum. But something between us had changed, and for once, we didn't hide from it. Eli woke before me. I felt the absence of him before I opened my eyes, heard the quiet pad of his footsteps in the hallway, the gentle clink of dishes in the kitchen. By the time I came downstairs, he'd made coffee, like always, like nothing was different. Except this time, when he handed me a mug, his fingers lingered just long enough to say, "Asterisk I'm still here dot asterisk." We didn't talk much that morning. We didn't need to. Later, Mason came home, bleary-eyed and apologetic for bailing the night before. Eli and I kept our distance just enough to not give anything away, but not so much that it felt like retreat. There was a quiet understanding between us now, invisible but constant. We were navigating the edges of something fragile. Something still unnamed. But real. And that was enough. For a while, we didn't try to define it. There were more moments, late-night walks where our shoulders brushed in the dark, movie nights where his foot rested lightly against mine under the blanket, car rides where music filled the space we didn't know how to. We didn't always talk about it. About us. But we felt it. In every glance. Every pause. Every careful closeness. Still, there were days when doubt crept in. When I wondered if I was making it all up in my head. If I was reading too much into a shared silence or a softened smile. Then he'd say something like, "You always look like you're thinking about 10 things at once," and I'd glance at him, startled, and he'd follow it with, "I like that about you," and just like that, the ache inside me would ease. One night, a few weeks later, I stayed over again. Mason had gone to a party, and I didn't bother pretending I was sleeping in his room. I followed Eli upstairs without a word. We lay on his bed, facing each other in the quiet. "I told myself I wasn't going to fall for anyone this summer," he whispered. I smiled. "I told myself I wasn't going to fall for asterisk you dot asterisk." He laughed softly, breath catching in his throat. "We're really bad at this." "Yeah," I said. "But maybe bad is okay." He reached out then, hand sliding into mine like it belonged there. Like it always had. For a long moment, we just breathed together. I watched the rise and fall of his chest, the small lines near his eyes when he closed them, the soft part of him no one else really got to see. "I don't know where this goes," he said, voice barely audible. "Me neither." He opened his eyes. "But I want to find out." And in that moment, I realized something simple but quiet and true. It didn't have to be perfect. It didn't have to be loud or certain or easy. Love, for us, was something that bloomed in the in-between. In the pauses. In the ache of not knowing, but still choosing to stay. I leaned forward and kissed the corner of his mouth. Soft. Simple. "I'm here," I whispered. And he whispered it back, "Me too." We still haven't told Mason. Not because we're hiding, but because some things are sacred. Some things need to grow a little before they're ready to be shared. But I think he knows. He's not oblivious. He's noticed the way Eli's eyes follow me when I leave a room. The way I smile more now. The way I don't vanish into the background anymore. Sometimes, I catch Mason watching us, brow furrowed, a question forming on his lips, but he never asks it. And for now, that's okay. One night, Eli and I were sitting on the porch, listening to crickets hum under the weight of a warm August sky. He reached for my hand without a word and just held it there. No questions. No confessions. Just stillness. Just us. And in that stillness, I realized something I hadn't let myself believe before. He wasn't just someone I wanted. He was someone I chose. Even when it was messy. Even when it was quiet. Even when the words didn't come easy. Because he saw me. And I let him. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of everything.